Hi everybody. I'm gonna go live for a little bit today as I build out some scenes. As you can see, I've built out a scene right here inside of Ecamm. So we'll work towards this. We'll answer questions today, and yeah, we'll get started with that here in a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and share this out over to Threads. Just to kind of give people an idea of what I'm doing. So just give me a quick moment. I'm sorry. I will be there in a second. Okay. I got to just kind of do something here. So if you're just joining me, just hang tight. All right, let's see. Let's go back. Story goes is that welcome. Happy to see you. If you are here and you're watching live on YouTube, you're watching live on LinkedIn, you're more than welcome to leave a comment down in the section below. I guess I could change that text right there. Ask you. Oh, I guess it's okay. So what I'm doing is I'm building out scenes right now. You won't be able to see the scenes that I'm building out when I show my screen, but you'll be able to see them when the finished product comes out. And the idea behind all of this is that it makes for a better video podcast experience, right? So it makes for a better viewing experience. People can go ahead and not look at just a screen where it's just a couple of talking heads, but it has some animations that come with it. So I want to be able to go ahead and share that out with you guys so that we can kind of see and show you kind of the aspects of what I'm doing, how I'm building this stuff out, what it looks like, and what it takes to build it out. So I'm very happy to share this really with everyone so that they can kind of get an idea of how it all works. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start out first. Let me see. I got to adjust and change some screens here. But what we're going to do is we're going to not necessarily show you, like I said, Ecamm, but I will show you I will kind of walk you through and talk you through the process. If there's something that you want answered, go ahead and leave that question down in the comment section below. So I might just share this out one more time with people so they can kind of get an idea of what we're doing. Welcome if you're just joining us. I might have to share this out onto YouTube, actually in the community section. So if you just give me a quick second, I might be able to share this out with people. There we go. Insert. Scenes. Let's see. Okay, we'll do that. And we'll go there. Okay, so again, if you're here, welcome. If you're on YouTube watching, thank you so much for watching. We're just getting started right here, so we're not gonna go too heavy or too deep into anything right now. I'm gonna be on for like at least the next, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes. If we go longer, then we go longer. we'll just try to figure it out from there. Okay. So hopefully you can hear me live right now. And we can just, we can move forward, I guess. So, again, I will have the chat available and open for you to go ahead and leave a comment, ask questions. So this is going to be pretty informal. This is not going to be like an actual podcast that we are recording at all. I really just kind of want to be here as, impromptu office hours. I'm trying to do these these office hours every Tuesday, but they're not necessary. I guess you couldn't say they're impromptu. They are really, they're kind of starting to be, they're scheduled out. It's starting to look like. And so I'm not too mad about that. As long as I can start building out a rhythm of what I'm trying to do, then it works out for me. And so I'm happy to answer questions for podcasters who are struggling with things like marketing. They're struggling with things with, maybe just getting started with a podcast, whether that be equipment stuff, whether that be, motivational things. And I totally get the whole motivational thing. It can become a bit of a challenge at times whenever you're doing podcasts. So I'm here. I get it. I understand. Building out the rhythm of trying to do something regular as a podcaster can be a challenge. It really, really can. So again, we're going to keep this pretty casual. This is not an actual podcast recording that I will be publishing to my RSS feed. I am just actually really kind of here as Q&A and to help build out some Ecamm scenes. So I guess we can kind of start there. And I really don't have an agenda. I'm not talking about any type of agenda that I'm building out for this particular live stream. What I really want to do is I want to talk about the thought process behind actually building out video podcasts and scenes within the Ecamm software. So this is something that I was doing in, I guess I'd say like 3 years ago, and I was creating videos for my podcast, and I was interviewing people, and I was doing that all on StreamYard. And I think for now, you can only use Ecamm for Mac. I believe. And so at the time I was using StreamYard, that seemed to be the thing that worked the best for me. StreamYard was a wonderful software where I was able to pull in guests. I was able to pull in, and create different types of scenes, but they were very basic at the time, and I haven't really played inside of StreamYard since then. So I really have made an effort into trying to invest in software that is actually housed on my computer that will allow me to create more animated scenes, because I am under the belief, and in the nature of the media world that we live in today, we like to have animations that are like what you see on the screen right here. And that allows and helps you to, I guess, stay engaged with the podcast if you're watching it live. Now, there is, I would say, questions about whether or not, video podcasts make a difference, if audio podcasts make more of a difference. It really, you could argue both sides of the coin, right? There has been data coming out saying like, oh, everyone's watching video podcasts. But when you break it down and you get into the extrapolations of what people are consuming and who they are, the extrapolations really lie in the demographic of the person that is watching your podcast. All right. So I come from an old school, totally old school area of where podcasting has always been audio only. It's always been something that is like an offshoot of radio. And it's something that, you could listen to on the go. You're at the gym, you're driving somewhere on a long road trip. Those are things that I think that I have constituted as always being a podcast. But I had a coworker at one point in time. He loved to work and watch the YouTube videos at the same time of podcasts. So he would watch, I think, he used to watch a bunch of comedians. I can't remember which ones he used to watch, but he used to watch a lot of comedians, and they all had their video podcasts that they would go on and do it on YouTube. And that's how he consumed. So there was recent data that came out, I believe, from Edison Research stating that who's watching your podcast really kind of all depends. It really all depends, because those people who are watching your podcast might be in the younger demographic. So they could be in the 18 to 25, 25, 34, more likely 18 to 25 demographic. And I think those demographics, they can go 1834, 1825. I can't remember what it was. I know on radio we were doing 1825, I believe. And then you're talking about the specific genders. You're breaking all that down. You're extrapolating, right? So people who are watching video podcasts might be younger. They might be more used to watching something that they see on TV. Whenever you have sports shows on TV that are doing it very similar to like this, then that is, I think, how the nature of how we consume podcasts, or at least video podcasts, are concerned. That's how we consume them. We enjoy watching them, especially if there's something that is more entertaining. You also have to take into account that when you're developing a podcast, what is the style of podcast that you're creating, right? What is the style of the podcast? What, is it educational? I mean, it's not to say that like a sports podcast couldn't be educational, but what I'm saying is that, like, let's say you are an entrepreneur and you are interviewing guests, and it's more of a educational stance on what you want to share with your audience. It might look a little bit different, and you might have, in terms of looking a little bit different, your audience might skew a little older. They might skew 25 to 34 age range, and that maybe it's more males, or maybe it could be more females, depending on the niche that you're going to get into. So video podcasts, it's good to have video on YouTube. I agree with that 100%. I have in the past said that you should not have video for a podcast, because it should be audio only. That video that I published on my own YouTube channel is way old. It's outdated, and I've had to update my thinking and go, okay, well, if this is how it's going to work, then video podcasts really are going to be the thing that is an addition to your audio podcast. So those are just some quick thoughts that I wanted to share with the audience here today, whether you are watching this on replay or you're watching this live right now. If you have a question, you are more than welcome to go ahead and ask the question down in the comment section of YouTube. If you're on LinkedIn, you can go ahead and ask a question. If it's not populating on LinkedIn and it's acting a little weird, come on over to YouTube and you can ask that question. I do see that I have one comment, at least right here, that we can go ahead and ask. There's a question. It's from Fernando Herrera. Let's go ahead and feature that comment. So he says, hey, Shannon, thanks for doing this live. I was curious, how much does a podcast producer get paid, and what type of responsibilities do they have? So this is a really good question to have, because it's a really good question to ask, because this really kind of is, it all depends on what you want the duties to be. I know that everyone wants to have, like, say, set duties. So to give you an example of like what a podcast producer, let's say in a split format, would look like. When I say split format, you're splitting the duties between the people who are involved. All right. So you have the host, you have the, say, producer. So the producer might be someone that is doing some research for you. You might have an editor. You might have a secondary editor at the same time. So let's just look at it from that perspective. All right. And then maybe we can boil it down to what an answer would be for you. Okay. And especially when it comes down to the pay. All right. So a producer, let's say for this instance, the producer that we have for our podcast with the Remarkable People podcast, her name is Madison. Madison does a lot of the research, right? She does a lot of the research of the guests. She is writing the questions down, and she's the one that's providing those to Guy, who is going to be conducting the actual interview. Guy's the host. He's the one that runs the entire podcast. He hires out Madison. She does the research. She looks at the books. She writes the questions down. She's the one that sets up the live stream for him, right? What else does she do? She sets up the live stream and the audio. So she's got that on that back end, right? Now, when Guy goes and he publishes his podcast, he doesn't publish it immediately. He pulls that recording down and he sends it over to Jeff. Jeff is my friend who got me involved in this venture. Jeff, he actually takes that podcast audio, and he cleans it up. So it comes with all the errors, I guess, that Guy has, right? All the errors, all the ums, the uhs, whatever. And he removes as many filler words as he can and spaces that he can. Guy, that's how Guy likes to do his podcast. All right. So Jeff will do that. He'll take about a day to clean that up, and then he'll send that over to me, what I do is I end up processing that audio. So on my end, not only is he done on my end, I'm processing not just the audio, but I'm laying in the music that goes into the podcast. The reason why there's music in that podcast is because, we want to switch up how that podcast sounds. We want to make it sound more engaging. Guy specifically has told us that the podcast needs to sound more NPR related. So we create a podcast that sounds like NPR. Sometimes we add in sound effects. Sometimes we don't add sound effects. I'm the guy that does that. All right. So you have 3 people so far in that process. All right. Now, if you were to be a podcast producer and you were to do all of those things, setting up the live feed, doing the editing, writing the transcripts out, having a secondary editor do the audio processing to where it sounds appropriate, that could be considered as being a podcast producer. That's a real heavy load. It is a very heavy load. And you want to be very careful about what you are taking on in terms of podcast producing. So this is my version of what I think a podcast producer should do. And I could give another example of what it's like, what a radio producer does too. It's no different than what a podcast producer would do. I have a friend that I work with at the radio station that actually is a radio producer, and he does a lot of the similar things that Madison does. So what you could do, technically, all right, as a podcast producer, is you could do not only the recording, but you can do the editing itself. And if you wanted to take on the responsibility of researching the guest and providing questions to the main person who is going to be conducting the interviews or doing the podcast, you can take that on as well. Now, as far as pricing is concerned and what you want to charge a person, it's going to vary, right? It's going to vary. Now, I know on average, it could be $150 per episode, or it could be $50 per episode. I disagree with the fact that you should be charging $50 per episode for the amount of work that you're going to be doing, because if you have learned anything about what you know how to do as far as editing, producing, which is going out and reaching out to guests and putting everything together, such as setting up the board or doing it remote for yourself, that's time. That's a lot of time that it takes for you to put into creating something such as producing a podcast. So I would say anywhere between $100 per episode to $150 per episode. Some people might think that's a little too steep, but you know what? I also look at it as too bad. Kind of, I don't want to sound like a jerk, but it is a lot. You're asking a lot of a person. I mean, it's basically a full-time gig when you think about it that way. So you have to be very mindful. I don't want to use that mindful and demure, but you have to be very mindful about what you're going to be taking on, because every additional thing that you're going to take on is another tool in your tool belt that you have had to learn that you should be charging for. All right. So in essence, becoming a podcast producer would really create and turn you into an agency at some point, because you would probably end up having to have someone do the social media, have someone create the marketing material, have an editor. You would have to create those things, those positions later down the line, and you might have to charge a higher premium. So then instead of $150 per episode, well, that's possibly going to include social media marketing. That might be another $150. So per episode, it could be $300, $400 per episode. But that person gets all of that, all those services together just so that you can go ahead and have a successful podcast being created. So I hope that kind of answers your question. I know I went a long way about that, but it's important to understand the nature of the positions of what you would be doing or how you'd be completing that podcast. If you know how to edit in Adobe Audition very well, or you know how to edit in, I don't know, Logic Pro or Audacity really well, and you can pump out a podcast really, really fast, then, kind of keep in mind that how long it took you to learn how to edit that fast, and factor that into the price in which you are going to be charging your client. Because even though you do it really fast, it doesn't mean that it didn't take you years and years and years or months and months and months to learn that specific skill. As an example, my friend is a music producer, and he was told that one of the musicians that went to him to produce his music was shocked by the price in which my friend Chris was charging. And Chris told him, do you know how long it took me to do that, to create something like that? Maybe not for you because I already know how to do it, but do you know how long it took me so that I could create it and make it a faster process for you? And no one really takes that into account. It's your knowledge, it's your ability to be able to create these things and pump them out faster, but it didn't come without a little bit of sacrifice, right? So if we were to read your comment again, let's see here. I was curious how much does a podcast producer get paid, and what type of responsibilities do they have? Those are the responsibilities. You kind of get an idea of what those responsibilities are. Maybe I'll make a blog about this and write about that, but you can charge, like I said, anywhere between $150 to $300 per episode, depending on what you are taking on. So just kind of be aware of what you're going to be taking on in terms of that podcasting project or for someone. Now, I'm going to ask you, Fernando, if you're still here, are you currently editing or producing a podcast, and what do you see as responsibilities for being a podcast producer? I'd be interested in seeing what you have to say about that, because I think it's important to kind of get a gauge and understanding on what that looks like. Okay. So I hope that answers your question. So I'm going to take the question down for right now, unless you have another question, and I'll go ahead and feature it right there. I do see people popping in and out of the live stream today. So they're just probably checking it out and kind of seeing what's going on, answering your questions. They're just seeing what's going on, just kind of curious about what it's all about. So we'll just kind of go from there. We'll kind of work from there. Like I said, if you're joining us, welcome. I appreciate it. Our intention was to go ahead and do this live stream right now, where I would be doing a live stream of setting up different scenes for video podcasts. If questions do come through, I will do my best to cut away from what I'm talking about and then answer those questions. So something that you should be aware of. So what I'm doing right now, what I've been planning for the past month or so, is that I have been planning to reboot my podcast, The Podcast Therapist. And so with The Podcast Therapist, what I want to do is I want to create a video element to it. And I, talking about this a little bit in the beginning part of this live stream, is talking about understanding your audience and understanding whether or not you should be doing video, because it can be very cumbersome and it can be very overwhelming if you're trying to add in a video element to it. Now, just as context as to when you're building out a podcast or you're building out something, there are many different ways in which you can create a podcast, many different ways. There is no one specific way to create a podcast, because there's just many, many forms of how podcasts are created. So the way that I create podcasts is that I really kind of take myself, I put myself in the seat of someone who is a radio broadcaster who is very familiar with equipment, and is familiar with being able to touch hotkeys at one point in time and being able to fire things off from a mixing board and have that podcast basically pre-produced ahead of time, so that I don't have to go into the editing process of, say, Adobe Audition and edit and spend, at least in my world, it would take me 20 to 30 minutes to edit out a podcast. Maybe 20 minutes at most. And when it comes down to my process of doing podcast edits, I'm not taking out massive amounts of filler words or filler words, or I'm more about taking out content, because you hear late night talk show hosts, you hear sports commentators, they all have filler words. And what's the point of doing that? If you're going to create a podcast that's like this, it's a little more casual. So it takes a little bit, it takes less time for me to do those things. I see there's another question, Fernando. I'll get to it here in a second. I want to finish this real quick thought. I wanting to go ahead and recreate the podcast therapist, but with a video element, with the intention of knowing that those elements that I'm using inside of Ecamm, that I can go ahead and boil those down into smaller pieces of content that would allow me to create a podcast that not only it appeals to people who are on audio, video, but now we have to play the game where we're sending out promotional pieces out there for people to listen to the podcast, right? So that's really kind of my intention of what I'm doing. And while I'm doing that, you guys kind of get to watch me from the very beginning doing this once again. From the start, I have previous videos on my YouTube channel where I have, they've been a little more silent. I have people coming in. I have my friend Chris come in and watching me, and I've had other viewers of this channel come in and they watch, and they're like, wow. And they're the first ones to see me build this out, because the moment that I get this up and running, after I build out my scenes, I will be able to start doing more regular live streams. So, okay, let's get to your comment here, Fernando. I'm currently out of the podcast game, but I did have a podcast a few years ago where I did everything myself. I would do all the editing, sound effects, coming up with topics, and it burned me out. Exactly. I plan on getting back into podcasting, but I want to go all in a possibility hire a small crew to help me, maybe sound engineer and producer, and try to bring in a co-host. So this is your own podcast is what you're talking about, and it's something that you want to go ahead and farm out to some other people. Yeah, so it does sound as though you have an idea of what that looks like, right? Like there is so much that comes into all of this, whether it become editing, sound effects, coming up with topics. I'm under the belief that if you can go ahead and cut those areas down in terms of the amount of workload that you have to do, if you can cut back on the workload ahead of time, it makes the process of building out a podcast a little easier. So I can give you an example of what that looks like in terms of how I'm doing it. And if you kind of just bear with me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a screen here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share, let's see if I can move this here. I'm going to move this up, and I am going to share this. There we go. I need to rotate it though. Hang on. Rotate it. Okay. So this is my setup right here. Of what we're looking at. Let me go ahead, and I want to add my face into this. Hang on. We're going to add my face and Brio. There we go. So there I am. And let me do a little quick edit here. Hang on. We're going to do a square, and we'll move me over. So I hope you can see that, Fernando. I hope you can see that. So I'm going to switch back and forth between what I've got going on here and, of course, the scene that I have just set up. So, I guess I could just kind of do it right here. This looks like what we can create. But I just had it right here. Let's see. What did I have? I had a Q&A is what I had. So what I could go ahead and do is I could go ahead and share with you the scene right here. So what we're talking about basically is we're talking about creating the shortcuts to building out a podcast that would be a little easier on you. It doesn't seem so cumbersome. It does not seem so overwhelming to you, right? So that I think that one of the most overwhelming things is that you're building out a podcast, you're recording the audio, you're capturing it, depending on how you capture that audio. And when you capture that audio, then it becomes a little bit more of it becomes very, very overwhelming in terms of the editing process, right? So you could do the editing process. It takes time to go search out those sound effects. It takes time to go ahead and process that audio. And those are things that I think can become very, very, it can burn you out, right? And it's done for me in the past. I mean, but I've just been doing this for so long that I just know that you shortcut it all through doing it through something like a mixing board. And I understand that not everyone has funds to get a mixing board, but I think that in the industry that we are in today, we have people and we have companies that understand that, you know, it does cost a lot of money, but it saves people so much time in terms of the process of editing process, right? Later down the line. So what you might be paying in terms of equipment, if you know the process, it will save you time down the line and it will keep you from getting burned out. So as an example, so I'm going to go ahead and show you right here what we got going on in terms of what my setup is right here. Okay. So I purchased the Rodecaster Pro 2 a couple years ago. When this first came out, this was something that I decided that I had to have it. I needed to have it. It was the closest thing that I would have to a radio broadcasting mixing board. That is what I'm used to working on. I'm working on a radio broadcast mixing board. And that for me was huge because I was able to go ahead and program the mixing board the way that I wanted to so that I can conduct a podcast interview the way that I wanted to do it, right? So when the Rodecaster Pro came out, I was like instantly, I thought, oh, this is amazing. It's got the shortcut keys. These are things that we have in the radio industry. It's got shortcut keys. It's got the faders to where I can go ahead and I can input different sound effects. I can do live mixing within the actual podcast itself. And when I go ahead and I do relaunch the Podcast Therapist, the whole purpose of me creating the scenes inside of Ecamm is so that when I do this, people can go ahead and say, they can come in and I go, okay, we're going to be coming back here real shortly. You're listening to the Podcast Therapist. And then I go ahead and I fire off my shortcut keys and I can go ahead and say like, all right, well, as an example, you go, okay, I'm going to fire off my shortcut keys. And I go, oh yeah, we're going to come back with the Podcast Therapist. Today we're going to be talking with Fernando Herrera, who is looking to start up a brand new podcast. That'll be coming up here after the break. Stick around. You're listening to the Podcast Therapist.
Launching a podcast can be overwhelming. You've got your equipment, a Zoom account, and a few episodes recorded, but what's next for a successful launch? The biggest mistake podcasters make is not having a proper launch sequence. Just like building a house requires a solid blueprint to ensure it stands strong, your podcast needs a...
So I'm going to stop it right there just because that gives you an idea of like where I'm going with this and how it works. So like I said, building out the scene so people can see the actual process of how I'm doing it. So it gives them an idea of what they're doing. Yo, what's up, Chris Stone? Visiting me again, creeping on me again. Still building out, dude. I'm still building out on these scenes, but it's taking me some time when you're going back and forth between a few things, but I'm doing the best that I can, and we're helping out Fernando. Excuse me, hang on. Excuse me. Allergies. Oh my God. And I don't even know if there's allergies. It's just dust in the air. So being in Arizona, there's a lot of dust in the air. So I've set a few things up, Chris. Look at that. How about that? I bring in comments. I've set that all up so that I can go ahead and have a scene where I can bring in the comments. So I'm kind of excited. I built out different scenes here. So, and we're going to get to Fernando here in a second. So I built out different scenes that will help us out. And so, screen shares, segs out, just things like that. So, I don't know if last time I had a rotating logo, Chris, I don't know if I had the rotating logo or not, but, I just made a real quick logo to go ahead and create, and I built it in After Effects. And oh no, you know what I did? It was the lower thirds. They were the lower thirds that I had created. So so I've created these in After Effects, Very simple. There's a very simple tutorial on YouTube about how to create these. Once you get used to using After Effects, then it's pretty simple. Then you're like, oh, this is like Premiere. So, but there's, the basics, right? The basics of Premiere. So I want to get back to Fernando and just kind of share with him like what I'm doing in terms of what we're talking about here. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much, Chris Stone. Rotating logo. Thank you very much. Yeah. So we're just going to have that little rotating logo in there for the time being until I can kind of refine what I got going on here. You just juggle a lot of things out. All right. So we're going to continue back with Fernando and just kind of share with him the idea of like what I'm doing in terms of showing people how I will create these things. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to show people how I create live mixing. So I think that is really kind of, this is the way that I do it. Doesn't mean that everyone else has to do it this way. But if I'm going to produce and publish a lot faster, I want to make sure that I have that set in place a lot, that's set in place so that it's just ready to go. Once I turn on the Rodecaster, I turn on the computer and I can just go. Once that recording is done, then I can go ahead and publish it. Now, one thing that I didn't mention is that on the Rodecaster Pro right here, and I don't know if I can share it right there, but there's a button right there. It's that green button. So I have that green button right there. I will record these podcasts on the actual Rodecaster Pro as well. So I will have a clean version of that so that it is actually publishable. It's not to say that the Ecamm isn't going to give me great audio, but I like the actual mixing board mix so that I can go ahead and have a cleaner recording so that when I take it into Adobe Audition, I will be able to just do a few little edits, and those few little edits take me probably about 5 minutes, and then it's ready for publish. So that's where you're really shaving a lot of your time down. So I think that's something that you need to kind of think about. Let's go ahead and go here. I really like that style of having a podcast sound like a radio show instead of people just talking continuously for an hour with their sponsor shout outs. I like using a soundboard, how you just did. Yeah, so this is how I would do it. I would just set it all up that way. Now, if I were to give you an idea of kind of how I did it, and I mean, I don't know if you have a Rodecaster Pro. I know Chris Stone has a Rodecaster Pro too. I think you have a Rodecaster Pro too, Chris, from what I remember. But if you're using the Rodecaster Pro 2, this thing is highly versatile. You could do so much with it. And I believe, Chris, you came from an audio background, or I think Jeff told me you worked for Sony or something like that. So you understand a lot of this stuff. You understand the nature of how quality sound needs to come over the internet. You just understand all of that. So what I would do is I would just go ahead and I would set it all up that way. And so if I can give you an idea of like what this all looks like in terms of, let's see here. In terms of, I don't know if I can set it up right here, because if I go into transfer mode, I don't know if it's going to stop me, stop the audio. I don't know. I don't want to risk that, but it should work. But I don't know if I want to risk it. Anyway, if I were to go into Rode Central, let me go ahead and hang on real quick. Let me come in here and let's do screen share. And you can see right here. So I'm testing out audio and have different audio pieces right here. Customizing the smart pads is going to be the huge thing. I don't want to go into transfer mode at all, but customizing the smart pads is going to be key and crucial to how you set up all of the hotkeys that are on the right side of the board. And it's important to have an organized file format on your hard drive. I would recommend either using some type of cloud drive or using an external hard drive. I use an external hard drive for all of my sound effects, all my music beds. That is what I am doing in terms of keeping things organized in case I need to re-access them. Is that a word, re-access? If I can access them again and place them back into and program them in to my Rodecaster. So that's just something that I think is kind of important that you need to have. Some things that I need to have absolutely, are specific buttons. Like I need to have a back channel so that if, say, Chris came onto the live stream and we went to a commercial break, I need to have a back channel set up right here so that when I hit that, it mutes everything, but I can still talk to Chris, but no one else can hear, hopefully. at that time. No one else can hear what we're doing as far as the audio is concerned. So it's playing my commercials, it's going through my sponsorships, it's doing all that, but I can still do that. I can still talk to Chris in the background when I need to. That's a feature that we have in radio itself anyway. So we have a feature kind of like that, where we have a mixing board that allows us to, shut off all the faders, but then we can still hear the caller on the other end. If someone had called in or did a Zoom, we can still hear them in a Q speaker, and that Q speaker allows us to still hear them. That's the same thing that you would have here on the Rodecaster Pro 2. It's just called back channel. That's it. So maybe I'll set that up one day or create a video on that. I don't know. We'll see how that all works. But this is really, this whole thing, setting it all up through Rode Central. You can set it up on the board. You can set it up through Rode Central. There's no good, right or wrong answer of how to do this. You can just do it, and it makes it, it makes it pretty simple. So yeah, that's how we would kind of look at that. So let's see here. What do we got? Yes, Chris has the Rodecaster Pro 2, and I'm sure you love the Rodecaster Pro 2 because I love the Rodecaster Pro 2. So there's also the Duo. The Duo exists, and I know I think it's about like $300 cheaper than the Rodecaster Pro 2. My buddy had purchased the Rodecaster Pro Duo, the Rodecaster Duo, and he was using it on a PC. And I knew there's some different settings. I know there's different settings on how you set it up through a PC because he wasn't getting quality audio that was coming out of it. It had to be something that had to do with drivers, and that became a bit of an issue for him at the time. But he did talk to someone from Rode, and they were able to kind of walk him through all of that to get that clean audio. And now he's doing voiceovers. He's doing live streaming with his son, so he can have the commentary, and I think that's really, really cool to have too. So the Rodecaster Duo is a really good opportunity if you're trying to not spend too much money. It's still the same thing, right? You're just condensing the board down to what I think is 4 faders, and I think it's maybe maybe six hotkeys. And so I think that is something that could be very doable for someone who just is trying to cut their workload in half, because that's half the battle, right? That's half the battle. The recording part, unless you're someone like Chris or myself, it's going to be easy, right? If you're not someone like us, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult to go ahead and record this because most people just say, okay, let me just get on a Zoom and we're going to cut this and we're going to do the audio, and then you got the editor's got to piece it all together, and that costs money, that takes time. It's just ridiculous, right? Let's see here. This is a good comment right here. The Rodecaster Pro 2 preamps are great. I don't use everything on the unit, but I can grow into as many shows, but it can grow into as many shows do. I think that's what that meant. Incredible product. Yes, it's an amazing product that you can go ahead and use. I have set this up just like for the preamps, and I've been able to go in and adjust the decibel levels to where everything is even across the board as far as audio is concerned. So my microphone is set to, I believe, -3 decibels, but my audio sources, such as this music bed, are set to -3 decibels. The hotkeys are set to -3 decibels. And when you import onto the Rodecaster Pro 2, it doesn't happen that way, right? You have to go in, you have to kind of adjust it. But it also, like a quick tip, when you get your audio, you'll have audio that is recorded at different levels, right? And so sometimes you have to go in and you have to create some type of normalization, or you have to limit that out, right? So you have to limit it, and then it's limited for that piece of audio, but it doesn't mean that it's going to play well with your actual device itself, right? So you've got to go in and you got to do some adjusting with that. But like you say, like Chris says, the preamps on the Rodecaster Pro 2, phenomenal. Like, they're great. This is as good as it gets. This is not a commercial for Rodecaster at all for this device. It's just that good of a product. And I've been looking for this type of product for years. I went to a couple podcast movements. I think there was a podcast movement I went to in 2015. And in 2015, I saw a guy, he had a mixing board that was like this, but it was an all-in-one. It had the microphone attached to the mixing board. And it was one of those things where he was like, oh, that's the wrong one. Sorry about that. There we go. It was all attached in one, and he was trying to sell that. And I thought, that is a really cool mixing board. I would love that. I just don't want the microphone. Right. So, and clearly he didn't sell it, right? He didn't sell it at all, because it's not something that I think that, or maybe he did, I don't know, but it's just something that you don't see in the marketplace today. People are using the Rodecaster Pro 2 or the Rodecaster Duo, and that really makes kind of a difference, to podcasters all over the place. So, if you're joining me, I do know Chris is here. I think Fernando is here. And someone else might be here, and others I think might be here. If you have questions, you're more than welcome to leave a comment down in the section below, and of course, I'll be happy to answer it. I'm only going to be on for about the next 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead and split. I am committed, by the way, Chris, I am committed to the fact of doing these every Tuesday as I can, and as I build out these scenes inside of Ecamm, I'm committed to doing this until I can actually launch my podcast. So doing them in a very casual format right here is okay for me. I'm cool with it. I'll leave the videos up on YouTube, and that's completely fine, so that people can kind of get an idea of what it is. But who knows, I might do more of these podcasts or more of these live streams where I'm actually doing the podcast and I'm live recording the podcast itself. Want to be able to build out a community of people who can see what's happening with how I'm building out not only just the podcast itself, but eventually getting into the marketing aspect. I think the hardest part about all of this is beginning, and it's building out everything in terms of the audio, the program formation of your podcast. I've got to write it all down, right? You've got to write it all down, and I've got to make sure that I have all these pieces ready. I have to have all the pieces ready in my Stream Deck. I have to have all the pieces ready in my soundboard on my iPad. Those are all the pieces, because that's how it's going to play. That's how we use it at the radio station. That's how I'm going to use it here at home. I don't want to do any more work than I have to in post-production. Not that that's bad, but I don't want to do any more work in post-production than I have to. I want to publish, I want to get it out, and I want to market it. That's how I want to do that. So let's see, what do we got? Oh, I love Peg. Peg is one of my favorites. We have Peg next Tuesday on Dealcasters. When are you coming on the show? Once I get this all ready to go, I got your link on LinkedIn. I will schedule something out. I know you guys are booked out for the next couple months, but I will get something on. I promise you. I will get on there. So it'll happen. I might be a little bit nervous getting on with a couple of pros like you and Jim. I mean, you and Jim are like, you guys are the pros. You are the Dealcasters. So it would be a lot of fun. I mean, I'd be like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, And I'll be honest with you guys. Like, look, I'm not as big of a tech head as I think a lot of people think I am. I am not a big tech head. It's similar to some guitarists in bands. They're like, dude, I just know how to play the guitar. I don't know anything else other than that, right? I think Jerry Cantrell of Alice in Chains has said, he goes, yeah, I know the basics of what the sound that I'm looking for. He goes, as far as my cabinet, everything else, he's like, I have no idea. I leave that to my tech. And that's kind of how I am. I'm like, I know how to play the guitar. I don't know anything about the cab or anything like that. I don't know. I just know what sounds I like, right? And as far as this is all concerned, and building out Ecamm, building out podcasts, I've been doing radio for a long time. I don't know the engineering parts of it, but I do know the processes of the programming, right? And how to get something out. So if there's a tech question, I would probably say this is the way I've experienced it, but there are way better people that know about this than I do, like Chris, right? Chris might be able to do that. Our show will be better when you are on it, my friend. I don't know about that, man. It might be a devalued show. Come on, buddy. I'm just kidding. I'm teasing. Perfect. Come on. We'll chop it up about podcasting. Alice in Chains. Yes, we can talk about Alice in Chains. Absolutely. One of my favorite bands. My favorite bands are Alice in Chains. Actually, it's Tool. If I were to go in order, it would be Tool, Alice in Chains, Metallica. Metallica held the top spot for many years, but they've been downgraded to number 3. Still in the top 5. So Tool, Alice in Chains, Metallica, and who else do I got? Recently, actually they're in the top 5 right now, but they may drop out soon. But Bad Omens, they're a newer band. They're one of my favorite bands. So yeah, I got at least those top 4 in a perfect circle. Actually, Pussifer, they're all Maynard bands, right? They're all Tool Maynard bands that I like. So yeah, we can talk about music. Let's see here. I have a 2-part question. In your opinion, which is better, live podcasts or pre-recorded shows? The second question is it possible to post too much content, or should you always be putting out shows? There's various opinions on this. Let me try to answer each question one by one, the best way that I can do. And then real quick, we'll just get to this real quick, and then I'll get to your question. Yes, Undertow, top 5 albums. I agree, Chris. I agree. All right, let's get back to you, Fernando. Okay, so which is better, live podcasts or pre-recorded shows? So the live broadcasts they're good if you have an audience that is ready to come in and listen. And what I mean by that is that you have been publishing consistently, right? You've been publishing consistently. However, and Chris might be able to tell you this a little bit better, but I do know this. Based on what I know from doing Facebook Lives, I do them every Thursday on my page, is that if you're consistent with it, you tend to gather more people on the offshoot. You have to kind of think of it as like a net when you're going fishing, right? The more that you cast that net out there, right? And the more that you're trying to gather shrimp or fish or whatever it may be that you're looking for, you're going to get something, and you're going to come across a time or a time period in which people are going to be gathering and showing up to your live stream. So let's use this as an example. Let's say you're going live Tuesdays and Thursdays every week, Tuesdays and Thursdays every week. You create a podcast, and within that podcast, you're telling people all this great information about what your podcast is about. Maybe you're entertaining them. Maybe you are educating them. Whatever that may be, you should be, as a podcaster, trying to not just keep them, but you need to be keeping them by pulling them off of the podcast and putting them onto something like an email list. And when I say email list, I'm not talking about collecting the email through Gmail. I'm talking about using a dedicated email service provider, and we'll just use MailChimp for it as an example. You want to collect them and have that data on those people who are listening to your podcast, so that you can share that message out to them when you go live. So this is all about driving traffic, right? You're trying to get them on a list to get them to come to watch your live podcast. That's only live, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you can't do this with pre-recorded podcasts. If you do a pre-recorded podcast and you publish every Tuesday and Thursday, and you're publishing every Tuesday, Thursday at 4 p.m., well, you have a couple things working in your favor. You have the fact that if they have subscribed, they're going to get that notification on their podcatcher alone, right? They're going to get that notification itself. That notification is going to either come up in a notification on their phone, or it's going to come up on a notification on their computer, whatever that may be. And that tells them, hey, there's a pre-recorded podcast ready to go, right? On the back end of that, if you have collected email addresses from people who are listeners of the podcast and they want to learn more about you, they're on an email list. You can send an email out to them saying, hey, today's podcast episode is live and it is available for you to go ahead and listen to. You can help drive traffic that way. That's another way that you can do that. All right. So whether or not pre-recorded or live is better or not, I would say it's not something that it doesn't matter. It just depends on what your objective is going to be, because your objective should be to get the data is what you should be doing. You should be gathering the data, getting the email, and utilizing that email list to go ahead and push traffic to the sources in which you want people to go ahead and consume. So I hope that helps out. The second question, is it possible to post too much content? I don't think it's possible to post too much content. What you do learn is that when you do post a lot of content, people do unsubscribe or they unfollow or whatever. And if you have an objective of what you're trying to gather in terms of like your objective, let's say your goal is that you want to gather a group or an audience that is specifically interested in what you are all about, they will stay. They will stay. All right. Now, and let's talk about the nature of the types of content that you're going to be sharing out. Let's say that you publish a podcast that is every Tuesday, Thursday. They know they're going to get something that is always there. Just know that when that podcast goes out, it's always being submitted and pushed into the feed on Apple Podcasts. If you've ever noticed in Apple Podcasts, when you publish something, it publishes out and it always pushes your podcast back up to the top. Now, I can't say that it's like that for Overcast or other podcast podcasters that are out there, but just know that every time you're publishing something, it's pushing that back into the feed. It's like old school algorithm, not even an algorithm. It's just pushing it to the top of the feed of what that individual person is subscribing to. If they're subscribed to you, your podcast gets pushed to the top of the feed. As far as social media marketing is concerned of your podcast, that's up to you. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to continue to always be publishing and promoting your stuff as long as it shares value. I mean, I think it's always got to share value. So, it's really kind of all depend, but you also have to think of it from this perspective too, Fernando, is that you don't want to burn yourself out, right? You don't want to burn out of doing all this work. That's why you're going to have to build out a team of people, someone who does the social media, who understands how to clip out the video pieces for YouTube Shorts, for Instagram Reels, for even TikToks, things like that, things that will promote your podcast. Chris Stone does a really good job of doing that, right? Where he's publishing always something that goes out to his feed so that people know that it exists and that people can go and listen. So that's just something that you can go ahead and take into consideration. All right. Let's see here. Too much. Or should you always be putting out shows? I mean, there's podcasts that go daily. The way I look at it this way is that podcasting is no different than radio, right? Like I have to go to the radio station every single night and I have to publish. I don't have to publish. So I have to do a show every single night. Right. And when I do that show every single night, I have to come up with content every single night. And some nights I'm inspired. Some nights I'm really on point, and people listen and they hear on their car, they're going from point A to point B, and they hear me do an impression of a girl or something like that, and like, oh my God, and they laugh at that, and that gives them a reason to continue to listen to me. Or maybe they're like interested in the fact that I'm giving away something like Disturbed tickets, or maybe I'm giving away something that would keep them interested in listening to me. But I'm doing it daily, and when I do it daily, it allows me to have an audience that is dedicated and loyal to me. And that has proven itself time and time again, because within the nature of how I've been doing this every day for the past 24 years, I have a group of people who listen to me. Just the other day, I mean, this is not a humble brag, and this is just an example, right? This is just an example. You build an audience because you are consistent with it over time. I was in Costco the other day. I just got done doing a radio station event, and within that event, after that event, I went to Costco and I had to go get my tires rotated. So I was wearing my KUPD shirt. I have a very unique look. I understand that. Long hair, beard, gray, whatever. I have a very unique look. And when my image is shared on our social media, people recognize me, right? So I was in Costco. I was looking for the eggs. I asked the clerk, where are the eggs? And he says, KUPD, right? And I go, yeah. And then he was just like, man, I love listening to you. I love listening to you at night. I love your segment, the 8 o'clock shuffle, all these things, right? And you build an audience that way. And you have to learn that when someone does that, you also have to learn to be very grateful and thankful. So it's the consistency over time where that happens. And as I was going through Costco and I went to the checkout, the girl at checkout recognized me too. So you build that community through consistency. I'm not saying it's through visibility, it's through consistency. All right. So just kind of keep that in mind. I hope that answers your question, Fernando. Let's see here. Consistency, yes. But a little better each time. It's like going to the gym. You can't do the same thing every time. Improve a little bit. Yes, that is very, very true. And like I said, there are days when I go in and I am doing my radio program, and man, I'm falling flat. Like maybe there's not enough music news that week. Maybe there's, maybe I'm going through something personal at the time. I do my best to make the experience of the listener as memorable as possible so that they're always coming back. And I think that is something that is a mental shift that you have to always remember, is that you're always doing this for the audience so that they can have a memorable listening experience. Now, when you add in the video aspect of it all, right, you're adding in graphics and animations and visuals, but I think it also comes down to the person and the human. You're trying to always develop and build out the experience for that person so that it's a positive experience, it's a relatable experience, that's an experience where they know they can go tell their friends and they'll say, I'm going to come back to him because he understands where I'm coming from. right? So the consistency aspect is huge. Like Chris says, like I said earlier, Chris says now, you just get better each time. It is, as an example, I'm sure Chris does, he does weights at the gym, right? I personally, I'm a yoga dude, right? I do DDP yoga, and I've sprained my ankle multiple times. I've had difficulties doing squats at the gym, lower back pain, whether you're doing weighted squats or whatever. And, you just got many different challenges that you're dealing with at the gym, right? So I had to switch it up. I had to go in to do something like yoga. And some of the yoga poses, I thought, oh, these are impossible. How am I going to even be able to do this? How am I going to be able to like stand on my head or all these things, right? Well, I have to learn that with each session that I go in and I exercise, that I'm going to get a little bit better every day. So there's a pose in yoga called the crow pose, and it's where you tuck your legs underneath your arms and you're just balancing on two hands, right? And it's a difficult pose. 2 months ago, I was not able to do that pose. Just the other day, I was able to hold that pose for at least 7 seconds on my own because I was consistently doing it over and over, right? You got to do it over and over and over in order to get so much better at what you're doing. So when we talk about podcasting, it's the same thing, man. You've got to just be consistent. You've got to do it over and over and over in order to get better. I've been telling myself this entire time, and I think of my friend Chris, or my friend Jeff and Chris, about it all the time, right? I go, I got to just keep doing it. I got to get back in a rhythm. I got to do it again. I was in a pretty good rhythm before COVID happened. Everything became chaos. Can't be an excuse, but I did get burned out because I didn't have a system set in place. But I have to be consistent with it every single day. And that's what I've been telling myself. I'm like, I'm going to do a little bit every single day. I'm going to build a scene out in Ecamm every single day based on what I need, what my needs are for my podcast. I've got my mixing board set up. I already have the talking piece down. At least I think I do. But I have the talking piece down. So now it's really all about developing the podcast and then going out and just doing it and producing it and publishing it and getting out there and marketing it, showing up on other podcasts, getting the word out about what I do, right? So just be consistent, Fernando. That's the huge lesson that I think we have to learn here. Let's see here. Yes, serve the listener audience. Pays off in the long run. Great stuff, man. Oh, I'm glad you like this. Yeah, this is all stuff that, I've had to learn over the years, right? Like I've had to go, I've been to many different conferences, on marketing where we talk about the marketing. Podcasting just isn't podcasting in my eyes. Podcasting is marketing. That's what it is. It's about the objective, right? In radio, it's the same exact thing. This is why I always relate radio back to podcasting. I know some podcasters don't want to look at radio as a means of what podcasting is about, right? But it's pretty much the same thing, because what we're seeing now with companies now and how they're implementing sponsorship features within their actual streaming software, their RSS feed or whatever it is, their hosting provider, and they're able to implement these areas where they can be sponsorships. Well, these are all just ideas that were just taken from radio. That's all it is. They're all ideas taken from radio. And so why not just lean into the thing that I know I'm comfortable doing and just do it that way, right? So we just got to remember that, everyone learns. I don't know, I kind of got off track there, but we'll just say this. Look, everyone does things a little bit differently in terms of podcasting, and how you do it is got to be what's comfortable with you. But if you want to take that level, you want to step that level up, right? You have to start investing in yourself. You have to start investing not only just in yourself, but in the podcast itself, in learning the processes, learning how to get the consistency down, developing the rhythms. I think that is a huge missed opportunity for podcasters when it comes down to rhythms. What do I mean by rhythms? I'm talking about the rhythms of how you operate your show physically. So if I'm talking about developing a show and I'm here, sorry about that, we got this right here. But if I'm developing a show right here and I'm able to talk in front of the camera, people have to understand that I have rhythms, physical rhythms that I'm going to be creating here on the mixing board. I have the microphone turned up. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go into commercial break. I need to go ahead and pot that music back up. That's a radio industry term. We pot it up. I'm going to pot this up. I'm going to get ready to play my commercials. Oh, those commercials are going to pop here. So I need to have a physical rhythm. So learning that muscle memory and getting everything ready to go so that I can go ahead and punch everything that is at a fingertip to develop a great show. That is what's huge. That's a missed opportunity for a lot of podcasters. If you ask me, in my opinion, those are things that I think podcasters need to learn. They have to learn those things, right? Oops, that was here. There we go. Got to get rid of that. Sorry about that. So yeah, those are just things that you got to learn. But I think the investment aspect of it all, I think what you have to look at when it comes down to the investment aspect is that you got to go to marketing conference. You're going to have to spend some money. I'm not going to say like you have to spend like, you can't spend like $20 on something and expect to get huge results. Some of these things are huge investments, and I'm not talking like huge investments like millions of dollars, but sometimes they do cost $1,000. Maybe you need to go to a podcast movement and you need to see what other podcasters are doing and how they do it. Maybe you need to see what their process is about, and then you see how they're doing it, and then you go, okay, well, I've done that process. I've perfected that process. Where do I go here? Where do I go from here, right? Then you go, okay, well, maybe I need to learn the marketing aspect. Maybe I need to learn marketing funnels. Maybe I need to learn what a landing page is. Then that means you got to start investing in other areas of your life. But it doesn't mean you have to do it all at the same time. It just means you got to do it a little bit by bit, by bit, by bit. And then once you start doing that and you start building those pieces, they all kind of come together. Maybe you need to start building in some affiliate marketing tactics, right? That would be something that's really good. It makes it pay off in the end. Chris, maybe when I get on Chris's show and then I can bring Chris on the mind, we could talk a little bit about the affiliate marketing aspect of it all, because affiliate marketing is where it's at, really. If you're not doing courses, you could do affiliate marketing, and affiliate marketing can be a consistent revenue source over time that will help you kind of get your fingers on, or it can help you wrap your mind around the fact that this is a lot of work, but it's paying off with the fact that I am creating affiliate marketing opportunities for myself. So that's just something that I think that is worth noting. So I hope that has answered your question, Fernando. I appreciate you being here. Thank you for answering all my questions. I mostly watch you when you have any podcast questions. I appreciate your insight. So I hope that everything has helped out. Sorry about that clapping there, for it's super loud. And I hope that it just gives you some things to think about. I would love to see you start developing and building out a podcast. But you don't have to start it out like the way that I'm doing it right here. I mean, you can start it out very simple, and that's advice that I've had to take for myself, and I've had to take from, say, Jeff, my friend Jeff, just telling me, hey, you just got to get started and get into the rhythm. And that's a true thing. It falls in line with the whole go to the gym aspect, right? It also falls in line with the idea that, the more reps that you do, the better that you get, the stronger that you can be. So those are just things that I think that you should really kind of think about. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it there, and I'm going to go ahead and split because I have to get ready for work. I got to go do my other radio show. Chris Stone, I want to thank you if you're still here, for being here and being on in the audience. You're one of the very few, right? You're one of the very few coming in outside of what I have on my YouTube channel. And I just got to be able to get this all set up. I mean, day by day, it's getting a little bit better, right? But I would love to have you on my podcast at one point in time so we can help each other out in some way, shape, or form. So with that being said, if you are watching this on replay, you're more than welcome to leave a comment down in the section below. There are links down in the description of this particular video. If you're looking to start a podcast, there's an essential equipment guide that will share with you all the equipment that I recommend for starting up a podcast, and that might be able to help you out there, and other resources that might be able to help you out as well. So in the meantime, I really want to thank you guys for being here and being part of this live recording, part of my effort to being more consistent. And I hope you have a great rest of the night, and we'll try to go on. I don't know. I don't want to make any promises, but I will be on next Tuesday, but maybe we'll try to go on again later this week, but I'm not going to make promises. Just make sure you hit the subscribe button and you get notified whenever I do another video. So in the meantime, have a good one, and I will talk to all you guys later. See ya. Bye.